Good afternoon and welcome to our April ad hoc committee meeting. This is the ad hoc attendance boundary committee, and we have been blessed with wonderful guests. Normally we go around the room after the board members do their introductions, and so really quickly. Your affiliation, and then we'll move to the next person. I am Green Moffitt, committee chair.
Keith Bolton, committee member.
And I'm gonna Rob, and then we're gonna go to Rob's left because he's gonna give some instructions for the people that are online if they happen to have any questions in real time, and then we'll move around the room very quickly.
Rob,
Britt Bourne, Silverton Council.
Phillips Davis, Board Administrative Assistant.
Shirley Haskins, Austin, Village Council, Silverton.
Angela Thompson, LSDMC Chair and Council.
School.
Silverton, I'm sorry. Silverton.
Robin Fox, Silverton resident.
Karen Kelly, Silverton, Cincinnati Public School retired teacher, tutor at Silverton.
Audrey Gover, retired CPS Silverton teacher, now substitute tutor at Silverton.
Before we get to this trouble, I want to make sure that you all speak into the mic and make sure that your mic is on. So I think Rob probably is gonna make sure there's a green light on there. Rob, were you able to hear everybody? Okay.
no, but I mean, for this one, I would just keep going.
Okay.
For comment, I think that's what I was focusing
You
on.
just have to share.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Carol Gibbs, Mount Auburn Community Development Corporation, LSDMC Chair for Chapter Elementary, and on the Community Council Board.
Oh, wait.
Erin Fay, parent of an 8th grader at Walnut Hills High School.
Rob Schmeling, Silverton resident.
Susan Cohen, Silverton resident.
Joe McGolley, Chief Information Officer.
Tracy Power, Community Learning Center Institute.
Andy Kaufman, LSDMC parent member from PRM.
Sharon Cheney, LSDMC PRM Chair and Gulf Meadow rep.
Dr. Ed Dollins, Silverton resident. Ellen Coulter, Silverton resident. Katie Riggs, Silverton resident. Brenda Miller, Silverton resident.
Wow, we are just heavy with the Silverton residents and the LSDMC and PRM. You all, hello and welcome. Welcome. You all are welcome to come anytime. So, let's just dive into our agenda. So on the agenda, first, we've got continued consensus items for discussion. I'm going to turn to my colleagues. This was a carryover from our last meeting. Anything in specific?
From carryover from the last meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering what that was. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think a meeting or two ago, we decided to try to come up with at least a handful of consensus items where we had started to reach some, I won't say decisions or recommendations, but where we were kind of focusing our discussion. I think we can probably table that for the time being and go deeper into the agenda. I also think too, besides the consensus, it kind of heard we might want to try to decide too about the ad hoc report. I know that's on the agenda later, that the board is waiting to perhaps hear our first report back. So I would delay the consensus till we get to the report.
It's very much aligned. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. I wanted us to kind of continue that and be one thought when we reported back and what we're going to be reporting back. And we actually do have some things to report back. Jeremy, you've been rocking it with these maps. So if you all have not seen our maps, look around the room, and then this is a new set, but we've got maps regarding walking distance. We've got maps regarding the neighborhood boundaries, the school boundaries that don't always align, and the city boundaries. So Jeremy has been super instrumental in giving us these awesome maps The big thick packet is all of our schools. If you want to look at it, you can't take it. If you want to look at it, then you are happy to look at it. And particularly Silverton and PRM, since you are here, you can see where your neighborhood, your walking, and your city boundaries are. That might be helpful because you can't always see it on the screen. So tabling that, let's talk about the item number 2, changing the Leader in Me school district-wide. I asked for that because we've got a lot of conversation from our Silverton families and our residents around the change in Padilla. And I know Silverton is a Leader in Me school. I'm very impressed with Leader in Me, but I asked the question of our administration, what would it look like if Leader in Me were a magnet option for our schools? And so, Jeremy, I think you're going to give us a presentation about that.
Good, Rob. Hold the first slide. So,
Can you turn off the volume? It's hard to hear back here.
Okay,
Sorry.
Rob.
It's not amplified, so you just need to speak up.
Okay, I can do that. I can put my teacher voice on. I'll just act like I'm at home with my kids. Sit down, hush, no. Yes, ma'am, I sure will.
I'll try to project to the room the best I can.
Okay.
So yeah, starting with the Leader in Me initiative, the questions that we talked about in between the last meeting and this meeting led to some clarification for administration. We looked at the program as a whole and pulled some initial data. There we go. Pulled some initial data, I think, that can be indicative of some information that we may want to look at. But I think we, as administration, we'd like to get some more details around the criteria, the parameters we're looking at to analyze that impact. Because starting with, just saying as the Leader in Me from a curriculum standpoint, if we wanted to turn it into a magnet program as a whole, the impacts could be pretty wide stretching in terms of the enrollment. So defining the parameters we would look at would help us be able to give a better impact analysis, not just on the schools that offer it, but on the schools that it could draw enrollment from around the district, because as a magnet program, it would then have district-wide enrollment. So on the initial data that you have before you today, we did include the 5-year enrollment trend for each of the schools that currently offer the Leader in Me curriculum, which is Cheviot, Covedale, Silverton, and SCPA. A couple of things to reflect on is some of those schools, particularly Cheviot for their gifted program and SCPA, have magnet status in certain grades already. So we would really want to, part of the clarification would be defining, are we looking at making Leader in Me the magnet status for all these schools or only for the grades that are not currently magnet? Overall, the enrollment for all 4 of those schools in the last 5 years, the net change, unfortunately, has been slightly less than what they've gained. You can see the numbers there. Cheviot, over the 5 years, has lost a total of 22 students, Covedale 105, Silverton 19, and SCPA 123. So again, we don't want to perform any analysis until we get more parameters, but I think we can start to look at what the enrollment has been given that at the schools that are currently using Leader in Me now and what their trends have been. The second thing is, or the next thing, is the potential transportation impact. Again, this is without defining all the parameters. You can see at Cheviot, the 3 to 6th grade already is a magnet program. So the enrollment for the remaining school would be 280 students. Approximately 52% of those live outside of the walking boundary. So they would then become entitled to transportation. They live outside of the attendance boundary. So they are not entitled to transportation today, but if we make the school a magnet program, then they would become entitled to transportation. Similarly to Covedale, there's 457 students enrolled. Fortunately, 78% or 78 students, 17% are outside the boundary. So we're looking at roughly a maximum, exposure of potential new bus riders of around 225 students. Recall in last meeting we talked about the very rough estimate for the cost per student. These would, for the most part, all be yellow bus students. So we're looking at about $2,000 per student, or close to $450,000 transportation impact. And finally, we also included the report card ratings for each of those 4 schools in the 4 primary categories over the 5-year period. Again, not doing an analysis necessarily at this point without all the parameters, but looking at the overall performance of those schools that have had Leader in Me for this period of time, you can see that the scores on the report card have remained relatively stable. They have not greatly increased across the board. So beyond that, I think that's where we would just be looking to see what additional parameters the committee would be looking for to have impact analysis created.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say a point of personal privilege that normally folks, the superintendent and the treasurer attend this meeting, and they're not available this day, unfortunately. So I just wanted to make sure that you do it. Jeremy is kind of subbing for both of them, which is a rather difficult job, but thank you for doing that. But normally the treasurer and the superintendent are part of this committee.
And along that line, I want to give him some grace, because if you have questions that are monetary in nature, he's probably a little nervous because that's not his lane. So we're going to give you a little bit of grace, Jeremy, because I heard the tremble when you said that's $2,000 per student. You know, that's a little, that's money. So we will reserve all of the big financial questions for our treasurer and our superintendent, but thank you for giving that. Yes,
I'll take good notes.
I just want to be clear as we move forward. I think when you were introducing the item, you said that it came to your attention, or how, because I don't remember us talking about the Leader in Me program specifically. I remember us talking about specifically the Paideia. So is this a new, was this presented to us as something for consideration, or how did it end up being part of the discussion?
So I will share how this got to my purview. I have received quite a few letters from Silverton families, from our PRM families, and it stemmed around magnet designation. At the same time, we've been getting a lot of, and you all know, from PRM and from Silverton, letters and emails regarding the attendance boundaries. I think all of this is happening concurrently, but in our discussions regarding transportation and the loss of magnet status for Silverton, I asked the question, hey, Silverton is a Leader in Me school. What does it look like if Silverton has magnet status based on that? So that's how the question came to me. And it was not asked of me. It was just me asking that question. And we were talking about the curriculum audit that the superintendent presented January and February. So it just seemed timely to ask for that additional information at the same time that we're talking about transportation, that we're talking about the impact of boundaries to students. So it was just really something that I asked about.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I think the part of the issue is, the main issue, and maybe folks can correct me if I'm wrong, major issue seems to be the loss of magnet status and the willingness and the interest in trying to maintain magnet status. You already know we're not going to maintain the magnet status for Paideia, because that was ended 3 years ago and then not acted upon. And I'm just starting to figure out why it wasn't acted upon to a certain extent, because of the devotion you all have to Silverton. So it won't be that. So is the idea that can Leader in Me be a magnet?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the issue that you're trying. So then administration is trying to figure out what would be the impact of doing that. At the risk of getting everybody mad at me, which I'm not, that's not unusual. At least going back as a person that introduced Leader in Me and was there when Cheviot signed on and their parent association voted on it, and a big believer in it, think it should be actually district-wide as almost our social emotional work. I think, at least from a purist or from a historical standpoint, it is not necessarily a curriculum the way we think of it's taught, but it's not necessarily an instructional method as much as it is a social, emotional, and a way of having the kids. So it's a little different than, let's say, a Montessori or what would be project-based or language. So you have to kind of convince, I think, those folks that somehow it would be that. It was a Vision 2020, and that's not necessarily to be confused with magnet status. So the interest is maintaining the magnet status and perhaps using Leader in Me as the purpose. And so then administration is trying to figure out what that would mean enrollment-wise and transportation-wise or whatever. My question is, my concern is that the belief that somehow, and I heard it from the mayor, and in no uncertain terms, the worry that somehow we're coming after Silverton, or wanting to get rid of Silverton, or that this is going to hurt Silverton. That's the farthest thing from our mind. And you may or may not accept that, but the idea is to, what we have large issues, if I might, Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Because you said for me to kind of do a little history thing. Our problem right now is we can't afford the transportation anywhere. We have that crisis. We also have because of COVID, we've seen a reduction in enrollment generally that is now coming back, thank goodness, and it's been particularly in our elementary schools, be they neighborhood schools or magnet schools. Our high schools are filled to the brim, and we have to raise our capacity for preschool. But the elementaries are all having some enrollment issues. So there's transportation issues, there's enrollment issues, and so what we want to do, find a way to keep wonderful Silverton, which I do believe is a legacy school. And it has the best of both worlds because it's as a person that used to be on the Mount Healthy City Council, you've got a city, and then you also, the benefit of having that city, but also the benefit of having the resources of a giant school district. Sometimes that's a burden, I know, but oftentimes it's good. So I just want to reassure people from the whole board standard that there is a set, and particularly this committee, there's no interest in harming Silverton, and what we're thinking in terms of Paideia was harming it from a standpoint that you couldn't get up to capacity, because what is Paideia to the general population? We did this to a number of East Side schools, and I'm a Paideia teacher. I love it. I'm totally into Mortimer Adler and the whole 9 yards.
Oh, yeah.
Did 36 years of it. 36 years of it in Wyoming. I love it, but it doesn't sell. It didn't sell. It's the best way to teach, I think, but it is wonderful. So I just want you to be reassured that we're not trying to hurt, so we're interested in hearing what you have to say. Our concept is, and one last thing, we're not trying to limit the neighborhood boundaries of Silverton only to Silverton, because as Jeremy's pointed out to us before, that might not be enough of an enrollment base, to your point. So that's why we're looking at the way we've done the Clifton Clifton area neighborhood approach. So I'm anxious to hear what y'all have to say, but the farthest thing from our mind is to hurt Silverton. We want to preserve it and make it even stronger.
We do, and as a point of clarification, I usually allow questions and comments after the committee members have shared her topic, so you don't have to wait to the end. You don't have to share, save it. Sometimes it's hard for me to wait 30 minutes for a topic, so I get it. But I'm going to let the committee members respond, and then we'll take questions on or comments on this, and limit your comment if you can. Be very succinct. I don't like that bell, but we're going to cut you off if you're too long. Now, I will share this. I disagree that the Leader in Me is not a magnet. I've spoken to Stephen Covey people. It is considered a magnet in many other districts. And so I don't think I think maybe it has evolved from the time of its first introduction to the district. I've spoken to some of the principals and they agree it is a magnet. So that's why I asked the question about looking into it.
From 7 people.
Right. So I kind of wanted that data. But I also want to share, although I am pro Leader in Me, I'm pro Montessori, I'm also pro a balanced budget. And I like being very honest with people on where we stand with regard to transportation. I want you all to have as much information as possible so that you can see what we see, so that the decisions are not shocking to you. It is amazingly shocking that we cannot afford transportation how it exists today. And I've been sitting in your seats as an LSDMC chair formerly. I was like, just make it happen. But when you have all the data, and it's all public, it's all your information. When you have all the data and you're sitting at the table and you see that we really can't afford to continue the way that we are going right now with regard to transportation, we have to do something different. Then it becomes, let's get at the table and see where we can actually work together for something, because it has to be different. It absolutely has to be different. So I want you to have as much information as you can. We started this committee, let's kind of go backwards a little bit, it was about transportation. Jeremy gave us these maps because we got this transportation debacle. Let's just call it what it is. It's a debacle. And we have limited funds. We want to keep everything great about CPS, but we got to do some things different. So let's look at the neighborhood boundaries so that we don't lose enrollment. Let's look at transportation so that we can actually be fiscally responsible with your money. And let's do this in public. So that's kind of where we are. But I have not heard from anyone on this committee that Silverton is, the desire for Silverton is to lose enrollment with eventually closing it. When I keep hearing that, it concerns me, because every question that I ask, I'm asking these members, not the administration. It has been, when this has been done historically, it has not decreased enrollment. It actually helps. Now, I have to trust that that's going to happen because I haven't been here, but I do trust them. I do trust them. So I'm going to go to Board Member Jones, and then we're going to take questions. Remember, 2 minutes or less.
Thank you. I appreciate the historical context that Ms. Bolton put it in, and I recall some of that. And I'm one of the older members. My son, who was older, my son is a grandfather, by the way, and he went to Silverton. So that tells you something. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I also agree with Dr. Actually, sort of answered the question that I was going to put forward. And so the question for me in the broad sense is, and this is something I think we need to decide if this goes on our moving forward projections or forecasting or whatever we do. But is it that the district wants to or should or needs to expand its magnet option? That's one scenario. Because there's nothing that says we can't keep the Leader in Me focus. That's what I'm hearing. Because there really are distinct. The Leader in Me, I hear you saying that there is support that says that it could be a magnet philosophy. And I just think we need to look at it from a big picture standpoint.
Sure. I don't deficit model of weekly transportation, because that's not fair.
I'm not even thinking about it from transportation. I'm just thinking about it from, and the need to sort of, because I know we'll be sunsetting soon, and I know we're not going to resolve it. I'm just thinking of a way that we can address it in a broader context.
So I saw Britt had a hand up, and then Carol had. Yes, ma'am.
Hold on.
Oh, wait.
We're going to have to make sure that people are mindful. I also want people to be cautious if they're going to comment, so that the comment can be recorded. So you go ahead and put the mic there. So I'm going to stretch this box back a little bit. That way this microphone can reach here. Okay, so we'll share it, pull that one out there. So it's going to take a little adjustments today, my friends.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay. So, and can you hear me okay? Am I good? Okay. So just a couple quick things, I think. First, when I brought up the concept of maintaining Silverton's magnet status, or restoring it, I guess is a better word, I actually brought up the Digital Leadership Academy and not Leader in Me, because the digital, and when I look at the numbers on the screen, it's pretty clear that if we have Leader in Me become or allow for magnet status, that's doing the opposite of what you want on your transportation impact. Because there are other schools who have the Leader in Me. Meanwhile, the Digital Leadership Academy is something that is specific only to Silverton. And so restoring our magnet status based on the Digital Leadership Academy, which is a specific curriculum, so that checks that box. And restoring magnet status, we're seeing on the screen is no immediate change to transportation problems. Seems to me that that's something that the board should consider. The other thing that I will mention is I think that there is a misconception that the Silverton community believes that it's the board's desire for the school to close. I don't know where that stems from. That's never been something that's come out of my mouth or anyone's mouth that I've heard. There is a difference, though, between desire and unintended consequence. And so when you look at our student population, and we have about 110 kids out of our 339 that come from within our neighborhood boundaries. And that's the district's neighborhood boundaries. That's not from within Silverton. So and I understand that the district's neighborhood boundaries are majority of the neighborhood of Silverton, and then we have some of Kennedy Heights. That's 110 out of 339 kids. No matter how you slice it, that is a massive impact on our school. And I genuinely don't know, without restoring our magnet status and just, I appreciate expanding our neighborhood boundaries, but that's a lot of kids to make up. So it seems like, and I would appreciate if the committee and the board would consider restoring our magnet status based on Digital Leadership Academy. Again, it's a specific curriculum, and it's something that is specific only to Silverton Elementary. Thank you.
Whoever was next. I'm looking for clarification. Is Leader in Me specific grades within the schools? I heard you say that some of the kids at Cheviot and SCPA are not in their regular magnet program. So is Leader in Me certain grades, and there are programs in certain grades?
So in referring to the different grades at those schools, the magnet status is based on programs they have that are grade bound, not necessarily reflective of whether the Leader in Me is part of that grade or not. So at Cheviot, their gifted program is from 4 to 6. So that is the direction or cause for those grades to have magnet status. It's not due to, and I'm not saying Leader in Me necessarily is only from K through 3, but that is the reason 4 through 6 has magnet status. Does that help?
Okay, yeah.
The gifted.
Minus the board members.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I think Brett expressed our concern very well, but I also have a concern. I've heard you say that you found out about some of the stuff that was going on, and you wasn't sure. So I'm sitting up as a LSDNC chairperson. I get questions coming to me that I have no idea what the answer is. So my request from you is there some way that we can be notified? I can be notified when you're having these meetings, so I'm not blindsided by questions that I have no idea that's going on.
Yes, ma'am. Are you speaking about boundaries specifically, or like just the communication
about the schools itself? Because I also heard that the outcome of this is to have Silverton in 3 or 4 years have to close, because the students and people are starting to leave, because they've heard certain things about closing the schools, and they have to look out for themselves. So when they ask me a question and I don't know the answer because I haven't been in on any meetings, I would love to be invited to the meetings that you are having that's concerning our school, so that I can share with them.
Yes, ma'am. I will say this. We are not having any meetings as a board concerning Silverton specifically.
Okay.
The administration may be discussing Silverton, and the superintendent, we can relay that message to her that you all would like to be included.
Yeah,
for
we'd like
sure.
to be included because we're getting information secondhand if we get it at all.
Yes, ma'am. I understand, and we will definitely relay that message. But I have not partaken in any conversations around Silverton. Have you? Have you? I'm just gonna go ahead.
I was gonna say, a lot of times when you do systemic changes like this, rumors start to circulate because of what you said. It's like the information loop, and I think we have to do a better job of informing people, of some sort of progress.
Yeah, because, when I hear,
periodically, so we aren't in a situation like this.
There
is no way any of us have talked about Silverton going on.
and I think if we was a part of that, we could help eliminate it by saying we've been there and it wasn't said. But when it come to me, then that's all I know.
Sure. Yeah. No, I get it. I understand. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to respond to that because
Okay.
that is an issue.
Mhm.
And the issue is that it's been for a long time, those of us that have been around a while, we know that there's always some hesitancy. You're not hearing this. Don't take this back, but there's always some hesitancy building to really fully inform the LSDMCs.
Yeah.
And that's a bad thing because that's 40 years old. I
Yeah.
mean, that's one of our proudest moments of having a system of schools instead of a school system. So I think that we can find ways without administrative folks or board folks getting in trouble when we try to communicate to LSDMC. So maybe we can take that back to the superintendent. That really
They
not
have
just a
concern.
notification of principals, but indeed the assumption that the principal's going to notify the LSDMC. Let's go directly to the LSDMC chairs. I know Carol's been a big advocate for that, and I know we have Miss LSDMC here sitting in the chair
I'm a
seat.
champion for you all.
So that's a very important thing to change in our operations. I appreciate that.
It has been noted.
Thank
Ms. Phyllis
you.
capture that so we can work on that. Let me go over here and then I'll come back. Yes, ma'am.
I've been a member of the board, so I can truly appreciate financial issues and the
Gotta get you on the mic. Gotta get you on the mic.
And then
There you go.
Thanks. I've been a member of a board, so I can truly appreciate the financial issues and the burdens that brings to an issue. But it seems to me we were talking about, should it be a magnet, should it not be a magnet? What criteria that are identified in your policies as what constitutes a magnet? And that should determine, it seems like, what is a magnet school. If it's a unique curriculum, which Silverton has, it seems like, and that's one of your criteria, that should help define or clarify the issue and help make a determination on that. And that is it not, needs to go back to what are your definitions and criteria for magnet schools, and do we meet them?
Well, I'm going to look that up and tell you before we leave what the policy says. I'm going to move on, but I'm not forgetting you. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm listening to all of the comments, and they're all great comments and great questions. I guess from my perspective as a community resident, a person who has always supported the Cincinnati Public Schools through the levies. I was an LSDMC chair at Schroeder Paideia. We brought the Paideia program into the district back in 1984 and created a K-12 scenario. So I'm well versed about how successful Paideia could have been. Since it's no longer here, my concern is about our neighborhood school. And the fact of the matter is that if the magnet status is being removed, we're going to lose funding. We're going to lose staffing. And if we lose those 200 plus kids, that means we're down to a very small number of children enrolled directly from the Silverton community. Now, to me, Every kid is entitled to the best education that we can give them, that we can pay for. That's not even a question, but my concern is if we can't bring the enrollment up as a neighborhood school in time, this may not be a good way for us to go. So I would hope that the Board of Education and the superintendent, we need to have people come to our neighborhood, speak to our LSDMC. We need to have a plan in place that is driven from the community and the parents to come to a collective decision as to what's going to happen to our school. I do believe that the decisions are being made based on not enough input from the Silverton community. We have came here today because we are concerned. And you know, when rumors begin, they may be rumors, but where there's smoke, there's fire.
That's true.
And you cannot, in 1984, we were told they were going to close Schroeder School because we didn't have enough enrollment there. We worked hard to make sure that didn't happen. We're willing to work hard to make sure that the legacy of Silverton School continues and that we have the funding we need. We don't want to lose those kids who have made a choice to come to Silverton and confuse their parents that now they've got to scatter and go somewhere else. It's just not the proper way to do things. So all I'm saying to you guys, and you all are great people, I know you have our kids at heart, and I know it's not easy to budget, but I will tell you this. Our LSDMC worked directly with the transportation department years ago to partner with other schools so that we could bring down the cost of transportation and make sure that every kid that wanted to come to Schroeder, that by the way was 50% integrated, made it to school and we could cover the cost to get them there. We cannot be cut short on this decision-making process. We will not accept it. It's not right. The superintendent should have been here today to hear our conversation. We are serious about our school. We are serious about our kids, and we're serious about our community. And we're not going to take anything else but to sit down in a collective body to do the work to make sure that we can protect the Silverton School and make sure that the kids that are coming there are going to get the best education that we can provide. That's the bottom line. So if there's anything else, I think we need to put this on hold so that the neighborhood can be engaged along with parents and other community people to get this thing tightened down the way it needs to be done. And that's my strong sentiments about this, and I know it can be done. If it's done the right way, people are going to come and say, thank you, Board of Education, for working with us. But if you guys try to push this down our throats and we have to accept this, it's not going to go well. It's just not. I'm just being honest. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Hold on one second. Did you want to comment?
I want to comment on the strong feelings. I agree. I think that the biggest worry would be the transition period, which is what I think in part you're talking about. That in this period, when you're moving from the magnet status to a neighborhood status, there would be a period where you would have less enrollment, which would mean less dollars and less staffing. And that transition period is a period of grace, very frankly, because those things do control. Enrollment is at the heart of it. So that's why any of this change that people are talking about, we're talking in terms of grandfathering those students, and we've talked about that in this committee, grandfathering those students and families that are there. We've talked too about the fact that the transportation issue is an issue, and it's actually, as Jeremy reminded me, it is a regional, sectional area too for what is now, we think, going to be the Eastern Corridor. And there are other changes that are happening. It's not just that you all are perhaps losing the magnet status, it's also Woodford would be losing. And so all of these neighborhood all of these neighborhood boundaries that were drawn more than a generation ago aren't necessarily reflective of the neighborhoods that are recognized. And they're also not drawn based upon the kind of diversity that we want. So there's movement in the whole area that I think will be part of that transition and the ultimate efforts, like we have done with cans in the Clifton area. But it's a transition period that you would need to really be protected financially and protected from a standpoint of transportation.
So I'm going to take a few more comments. I'm just going to share my thoughts. I heard you say that you wanted increased engagement. That flat out, you want communication and increased engagement, and you want a seat at the table. So as decisions are being made, you want a seat at the table. I heard you say we need to know in real time when you know, as I tell my kids, when you know, I need to know. I want to know that. I want to understand that. As a former LSDMC chair, I heard that. And I think what you're saying makes sense. So my ask to administration will be that engagement increases specifically because that's what I'm hearing that you want. But I want you also to hear, not our intention to close Silverton. It's not our intention, and it could be unintended consequences. I heard you. I want you to know I'm hearing what you're saying. Sometimes you can do something and it's not the intention, but that's going to be the cause and effect, and I get it. There was somebody over here that had a question.
Well, I didn't have a
Or statement.
question. I wanted to make a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm on Silverton Village Council.
Just get on the mic.
Oh, okay. I'm on, it's on. Oh, it was on? Yeah, it was on. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The Village of Silverton has provided $100,000 to Silverton Elementary School. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. Our council voted for this because Silverton School is important to our community. The first part of that, in 2021, the first $50,000 was funded to pay teachers that were providing supplemental tutoring to students after school. It helped assist those who suffered educational loss and hardships during the pandemic. The second $50,000 was donated in 2022, and it was an investment in the technology at the school. It was to help make Silverton Elementary a school of choice in the Cincinnati district. If the board were to prioritize technology at Silverton Elementary, the school could possibly regain its magnet status. Other parents around the district would no doubt choose technology and the Leader in Me as an educational track for their children. Not only does the Village of Silverton provide support and assistance to the school, but the businesses in our community, they support the school as well. The BMW store and 4 other businesses donate funds for the yearly October Fun Fest. Pumpkins, food, games, prizes, they're all provided by our business. High Grain, which is the business in Silverton, this evening is working with the PTA to provide a fundraiser for the school. The past 2 years, the school's Color Fun Run, held in May, is supported by the village, by Silverton residents who volunteer, and the businesses that donate funds and supplies to that event. Once a month, council has a sixth grade student, which is recognized for his or her excellence in education. Silverton Council honors, and they present each student with a gift card for books, a certificate of excellence, and other mementos to show them that we are proud of their achievements and accomplishments. It would be a great loss to us if this school fails to continue in the future. And it is my wish to please dialogue and work with our community and school, and we will work and continue to support Cincinnati. That's all I wanted to say.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's your turn. Go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to.
You gotta get you on the mic.
Good evening, everyone. And I want to thank you for this opportunity as well. I wanted
Green
to.
light on. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to I have a couple questions, really. My number one question as I sit here is the children that have been displaced already, maybe because you changed the magnet status, maybe the Bond Hill, the Roselawn area children that have been going to that school, how are they going to get the same quality of education? And where do they go? I'm really concerned. I was concerned enough that because I'm a small business owner, I own a child care center. We support Silverton and have for 24 years now. We also support Woodford, and we support their teachers, and we support them in every way that we can. And I cannot say enough of what Silverton, the type of school that is. So when we have children that can leave from different areas and go to a magnet school, we learned a long time ago that that's a good thing. So now for me to hear Woodford, whoa, wait a minute. I'm concerned also because I know that we did Paideia I love Paideia. I just got to say it, But also, if we haven't taught the parents and trained them and educated them about what Paideia is, or I don't know what the leader in me is, and I'm active, how do we know how do parents choose what's best for their child if they don't know what the options are? If the community doesn't know what the options are, how do we support the schools in a better way? We offer transportation. How can we support that? How can we work together as a community? But we cannot get rid of the magnet status unless we have something in place that's going to be better. So what's in place? If we're discussing changing magnet schools and taking the magnet status, what are we replacing it with that's better? That's my question. So I want to ask that. And then I just wanted to ask, what's special? Do we have a special request to speak directly? Not that we love speaking with the people here, but to speak directly with the superintendent, because this is a huge issue. It's huge for community. It's huge for parents, families, and our kids. I'm just sitting here for the kids because Silverton is an excellent school, and nothing should happen unless it's going to improve the school. And we need to know that so we can have a part of it and help. So, as a taxpayer, personally, individually, as a business owner, and let me tell you, we pay lots of taxes. I want to be involved, and I want to know what's going to happen to the schools before we sit in a meeting. Have parents at Woodford, have parents that go to the different schools that we service. How do they know that that's coming up if we just hear this like this? It's really concerning. So I think it's how do we get parents educated? And they are leaving because they hear things and they got to figure out, we got to go to work. My last question is the transportation issue. I only hear about that from the news, and it's always derogatory. I hear that you say we can't afford it. Well, that's a major that's a major component to having children in school. So are we doing too much with outside resource? Are we resourcing entities other than the public schools that maybe we need to cut that and let them pay for their own transportation? How is that happening? You know, because I guess if we could see it, we could understand why we can't afford it.
Yes, ma'am.
You know what I mean?
I do. I'm just gonna, because that transportation piece just, it just digs in my cross. So let me just tell
I
you.
have parents now that their children would be standing outside, girls. And when I heard it, I thought, wait a minute. So I know I don't know this, but I believe that we support transportation for other school systems. Can they support their own and give us, I don't know the rules.
We're required by law to, if they live in the city proper, in district, we're required by law.
To give some support.
No, to transport.
Transport at the detriment of the public school children.
You got
Yes.
it.
How do we
And
change
we've
that?
been, well, we've been fighting this fight for years.
Yeah, but
And in addition, if I might, I'm sorry.
I was like, well, see, it's a
Okay,
bunch of
real
mamas
quick.
in here. Y'all didn't.
But
yes.
in addition to that, you know, and it's interesting because I was picking up lunch at McAllister's and I'm sitting there waiting on my food and one of the workers was just going off in there while she's working, talking about the transportation with Cincinnati Public. And it was ugly. So I walked up to her, introduced myself kindly, and I respected what she said, and we had a dialogue about it. And I said, you know, the issues with buses were not created. We have some systemic issues, but they were not created by us. They took away, Metro took away all of our designated routes. They said bus shortage, but not bus shortage, driver shortage. They still say driver shortage. That is the biggest factor in why we're here today. And we haven't made any decisions yet. I want everybody to know that. We haven't made any decisions. And I think I agree with Dr. Moffitt. We hear everything you say. We're going to take it back because I think it is. I mean, it would be fundamentally wrong if it didn't bring you all into this. But I think also people need to be educated about the realities. And some of this, and I think I heard Ms. Bolton say, we are living in some realities where we're going to have to make some changes. Everybody's not going to be happy. And we know that right now because we just changed start times. And we're hearing it. We're hearing it because we have to make the bus situation work. So, but we hear you.
And
I just wanted to
I
clarify
appreciate it because I'm watching children. We made our center a bus stop so they could get off and they know if you have any problems, you come to this store. And I'm watching babies way up the street on the phone waiting on their parents. It's got to be about the safety of the child.
Right.
So we can work together and do more.
We only on number 2, y'all, and this is how we get backed up. But I want to say this, just a really brief overview of transportation. Since I have so many people here, I want us to kind of really sum up what we've been talking about for months with regard to, Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
I was just looking at it. I was just looking at it from the teaching point of view. I've been at Silverton for 50 years. I started my career at Silverton, at Kennedy, old Kennedy to old Silverton to new Silverton. And I've seen generations of children, and I'm still looking at the parents of the children that I've taught or that have been at Silverton, and they don't necessarily come from the Silverton community. They come from all over, and they stay at Silverton because of the environment there. I think when you look at this, you have to also take that into consideration. These people from other areas, not just the Silverton area, who have made sure that their children attended that school because of its traditions, because of its legacy. And as teachers and as parents, we see what accomplishments those children have been able to make over the years. And I think that has to be a big consideration when you're thinking about taking their ability to get their children to Silverton away. That's the thing that bothers me, is that I know, and I know this, that after 50 years, I know there are several parents who bring their children there because they went there. And because all of their children went there. I can walk down the street any day and see one of my students and they'll say, "Hi, Miss Kelly, my kid is coming to Silverton." They don't necessarily live in Silverton, but their children are coming there because of legacy. So hopefully something can be done. I understand your dilemma, I truly do. But also you have to understand the dilemma of what is happening here and what can happen here. We just want a fair treatment, someone to look at the whole situation and respect it in all of the aspects of it. That's all we're asking.
Well, I definitely hear you, and we hear you, and it is our responsibility, because you've given us this charge to actually let the superintendent know that that's our desire too, is that engagement happen. And I'm going to move us on to number 3 out of 9. But I was going to say, we do have to, as a district, transport by Ohio Revised Code all students in public schools and private schools and charter schools and parochial schools and charters as well. And so the state requires that of us. And additionally, as my colleagues always say, which I don't ever say, but they say they don't like our students at the state level because they say, well, hey, your kids can get on the Metro, but private, parochial, and charter school students cannot. So we have that added expense. We have that the disparity in treatment for our students and I'm going to say other, but that's everybody but publics. And we feel like, you know what? No, our babies deserve the exact same thing. So what we've also decided to do, the state requires transportation for 2 miles or more. Is it 2 miles?
2 miles.
2 miles from the school or more. Cincinnati Public has said, well, we want our kids, if they're 1 mile from the school, we want to transport them for safety. So we are going above and beyond what the state said, because if we were to go the 2 miles, we would not have to transport. I think it was like almost 1,500 students we would not have to transport.
It's close.
It was, I think it was like 1,300 students that we would save money. If it's $2,000 a student, we would save that amount of money times 1,300 that we would save on money. But we've said, no, let's make it down to 1 mile. So we've asked the administration to look at what does it look like if we just go up to 1.25, because we want to transport all of our kids. We want it to be as equitable as possible, and we want our kids to get to school. Because let's just be honest, we're living in different days than when I was going to school, and I'm 50. Our kids are very transient. They can go to 3 schools in 1 year. We're trying to make it from a board perspective as equitable as possible and as easy as possible within the confines that we have, because we got lots of money for COVID, but it's gone. And we have to start making some cuts and some decisions. Now, my position is, let's put you at the table so that when we have to make changes, you've heard this every single month for the past 8 months. You heard it. You know, we're working on that. We have new administration. She wasn't able to be here today, but she's going to listen in, and she's going to be able to hear what you all are sharing with regard to the legacy that's there, because we don't want to diminish the best parts of CPS at all. And I hear you, because you all came. This is how things get done. It's because people come and they share, and you're taxpayers and you're voters, and you come and you share with us what you want. That's how things get done. And I'm glad it's PRM in Silverton, because historically it's Walnut Hills. I'm gonna just say that. So it's our regular people coming and advocating for their school. Now, one more comment. Who's somebody? Yes, ma'am.
That's my concern. I co-sign everything that she just said. I've been at Silverton for 43 years.
Wow.
Right out of school, right into Silverton. So, and this is my mentor. Yes, it is.
I love it.
So my concern is then, if the magnet status is taken away, how do we prevent the unintentional that will happen? It will. The unintentional loss of students to the point of it's not feasible to keep the school open. So how do we make sure that that unintentional doesn't happen if in fact magnet is taken away for good?
Yes, ma'am.
How do we prevent it?
The way that that's prevented is to worry about that transition period where there would be that somewhat of a gap or a change, but more particularly the way that it would be prevented and what we believe will happen based upon history is that you look at your attendance boundaries and draw new ones. That's what's going to happen. And from that standpoint, if you look at attendance boundaries, whether when you say, that's why Kansas is called Clifton Area Neighborhood School, because it's not just Clifton. It's Clifton proper, but it is also contiguous neighborhoods or not even contiguous neighborhoods that would be within the drawing of that core area where your wonderful school is. So that's the first thing you do is you start to look at the attendance boundaries that could develop. And the reality is, as some of you know, whether it's Woodford or PRM or whether it's JP Parker or whether it's Silverton, that whole core we tried to look at 5 years ago because there were schools that were under-enrolled within it and one school that was over-enrolled, and that was PRM. And a decision was made to expand that building rather than change that neighborhood boundaries or attendance boundaries. So the first thing I would say is start looking at the attendance boundaries based where that natural love of Silverton abounds, very frankly, and it is a legacy school. And not all of our schools are legacy schools. Most of our high schools are, because this is a crazy place about high schools. But a lot of elementaries are not. So that's the first thing to begin to think about. As that's what the administration's trying to come up with, and if I can just say, the thing that has carried CPS for more than a generation now has been choice. It's unaffordable.
The way it is.
It's unaffordable the way we've done it in the past. We have to find choice, whether it's creating 3 different corridors and making sure there's programs within each of those corridors, or whether it's redrawing some attendance boundaries. But that would be my first suggestion to you, to your question, how do we avoid what you think might happen when indeed enrollment goes down and we shutter the school? It's not going to happen. Because we're in a growth period again now that we're through COVID.
Still have Does the school district still have an alternative or magnet school department? Don Clark used to head up the alternative school department for years. And I guess the reason why I'm asking that is because he was totally engaged with our community to bring together the transportation people, the people who came up with the programs for the magnet schools, so that everybody could participate in just getting the information and working collectively to help resolve some of these issues. For example, they did some marketing for us to bring kids in. They went to different schools throughout the district and brought kids from everywhere. So it's just a thought. But it did work years ago, and we were integrated 50-50 at Schroeder for years. So it's just a thought.
That's a great idea, and we're gonna make sure that the administration gets that historical perspective.
I would appreciate that.
Yes,
if you
ma'am.
would.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. This is our last comment.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you for having us. I am I'm a PRM parent and Clark parent, and I am loving all of this passion, and I'm very passionate also about Montessori education because that's what I've known. Also, I'm a Kennedy Heights resident. Love living in Kennedy Heights. I feel like we're constantly on the chopping block. And you're in Kennedy Heights, your boundary is going to get cut. It's like, okay, well, we're like 2 or 3 streets in Kennedy Heights. I don't know how much that's going to impact you. And I love that my kids can run up the street and play with their neighbors. So I appreciate like all of the boundary talks, and hearing it make sense just as a parent myself. I would hope that a community engagement would be had to hear. I know that all of my neighbors want our neighbor kids on our street to go to the same school and run around and play together. And so having that discussion without neighborhood
Input,
yeah, thank you, just feels unfair. So I would hope that should this be a discussion further for any school, I think that expanding it, cutting it, it doesn't feel fair to move into a neighborhood, move onto a street and be like, oh, you're no longer allowed to go here. So that was
Good.
Thank you.
That is exactly.
Okay, so
Will you allow us to have another meeting so that we don't have enough time? I know you can send your agenda, but how do we get this as a separate special meeting for Silverton's issues?
So we're gonna pass this on to the superintendent because that's who should conduct that meeting. Yes, ma'am. And we will, I'm sure that, Rob, did you know it went off up there? We will be, I'm sure she will hear it from me and our notes, but I'm sure Jeremy will take that back. He's our staff liaison for today, and he will take that back that I think so. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. And I think honestly, your LSDMC chairs and your community councils can also send an email and just request. I think that there's no harm in that at all, to just send an email and say, we would like to convene a meeting. Okay, you were going to be the last comment. No.
I want to address the communication piece. When we started the what used to be LSAC, now it's LSDMC, the superintendent used to have meetings with the chairs. Not only did we get communication that way, but it also built relationships with the chairs, that if something came up for that particular school, she could call the chair and say, we have an issue, or we're going to make this change, or whatever the communication was. And it was beautiful. It worked beautifully. Just FYI, and by the way, the guy sitting behind me wants to make a comment.
You want to make a quick comment? She's sliding the mic to you.
Whoa.
Come on now.
Thank you, my dear. We're old partners in crime.
See, that's trouble number 3 over here. Got a long list.
I'll make it brief. Mark Query, I'm on Silverton Council as well. 30-year resident of Silverton, so 30-year CPS taxpayer. So I moved to Silverton when I was 2, because, you know, I've got the gray hair that makes you think I'm older than I am. I so appreciate seeing so many familiar faces here, and I think it's a great example of the passion that we have for our school and for the students. And I would say also just look at the makeup. It's diverse, just like Silverton, and that is our history. And, you know, I know that there's these transportation related issues. I know this is a deep thing, but the transportation issue needs to be fixed somehow, because the diversity of the students is beautiful at Silverton, that come outside of neighborhoods right next door and so forth. And I would just share with you what happened to me in February meeting, and I'm not going to drop complete name, but Gabe, my friend Gabe, who was student of the month one month, and I was the council person that I was honored to present him. And what a story. And after receiving his award, he went out in the hall with one of his teachers. Oh, was he? Miss Kelly, was you? Okay. But he was in tears. And he said to Miss Kelly and, shoot, I can't remember the other teacher's name. But anyhow, he said to her, I finally have something in my life that I can be proud of.
Okay, you done made me cry. Where's the Kleenex?
And it's a beautiful young man who, he first arrived at Silverton in the 3rd grade. He still has a lot of things going on in his life, but in 3rd grade he had behavioral issues, and now he wins the Student of the Month award in front of all of his peers. He wants to become a zoologist. I was so moved by him. I called my buddy Thane Maynard up later that morning and talked to Thane and told him all about Gabe. And that's just what we see every day, all year, every year. Thanks to people like these two beautiful ladies, Miss Kelly and everybody else at Silverton. We just can't emphasize enough that whatever mountains need to be moved, they need to be moved so that these negative impacts will not occur. Thank you.
I know. Okay. Wait a minute. I'm gonna get, because you remind me of my grandma. I'm gonna let you have the last word. I cannot tell you no, but I want to emphasize to you all, it is 5:15. We have a hard 5:30 stop. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna let grandma speak, and then you can speak, and then that's it.
I mean, we all are from Silverton, and I just want to thank everybody that came. We've shared, we've learned things from each other, and we just want you all to listen to us. And I think that has happened. Now we need the action behind the conversation. And if there's, I believe you when you say you're going to do what you're going to do.
Yes, ma'am.
And I trust that, these people, we worked hard. You know that now. And that's why you can text all day, but you never get the results from a text that you get from people talking to people face to face. And that's why texting is okay, but I think this accomplished more than 100,000 texts could have done. And we appreciate you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Very welcome.
That's it.
Yes, ma'am. That's it. This is the last one.
Mine is very quick. And I also have heard all the passion here. And
Is your button on?
Students.
Not now.
It's on. Okay. And I don't have children at Silverton School. However, I'm very concerned about the children there and about the community in which I live. I love Silverton. I love being a resident there. But I also know that we do have to have some way of making the parents more aware of what we are doing and what needs to be done, so it can be a mode of communication with the parents, that they will have this flow of knowing how important everything is and how the magnet school of Silverton is important to us. And also, one thing about it, when a house is cleaned out, it's only two things that's going to happen. Either negative or positive is going to take over. And we definitely want positive influence and positive vibes and positive everything to be about Silverton, and especially about our children in Silverton. So therefore, that's all that I have to say, is that the parents need to have a steady flow and to become more involved in what is going on here. And also, Kay and I, we have volunteered to be tutors there, and I have tutored before there at Silverton School. And I think there's a part for each one of us to dedicate ourselves to improvement of the school and of the community, period. That's
And
all.
we've got an organization that's gonna come in next year, Healthy Visions and Health with the. We have an organization, I went to their fundraiser, Friday night, and they go into the schools and help with reading and other areas of curriculum to help raise the expectations for the students. And they have been very successful. So I need to introduce them to the principal so that we can make plans for next year in our new magnet school or our magnet school. Because everybody said it. We love our neighborhood. I've been there, I hate to say this, but 46 years. Both of my kids had those ladies as their teachers.
I
My
love it.
children moved on. They're both two successful adults because of the efforts of those ladies, even though David cried at that one when he had to sing. But anyway.
Y'all about to make me cry. So, look, we're
All
going.
I know is everybody here vested interest in our school, and we cannot detach ourselves from that.
Yes, ma'am. I got.
We
well, I
cannot
know.
let somebody tell us that we can't have what we need. We
I-
just can't. That's because
I'm with you.
we just love our kids. We love our neighborhood. And you guys built us a new school, so we got to keep it full of kids. We just can't.
Well,
change
you know,
that.
if we built a new school, we're not trying to tear it down. I tell you much. So let's you are very, very welcome. Let's I know, you know, we're gonna, if the committee doesn't, we're gonna skip to number 4, which is the plan for Pleasant Ridge Montessori School. And I'm gonna tell you, we're not taking 45 minutes. Ma'am.
We requested that.
No, I'm saying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
See,
I thought we were gonna skip it.
No. I'm saying. Yeah. See, I feel like I'm about to get a whooping. I tell you. No. I am saying that we're going to skip number 3 and go to number 4 because this is another carryover from the last month. And but we
are gonna have another meeting.
yeah, we actually really do have some things to go. So we're gonna plan another meeting, but for right now, PRM has the floor. Plan for Pleasant Ridge Montessori School under the agenda, ability to choose another school if preference is not PRM Montessori. But we can't take 45 minutes though. Yes, ma'am.
No, we have requested by letter for our parents to be able to have a choice when they move into Pleasant Ridge. The parents have actually asked us for it because when they sign up their children, there's only Pleasant Ridge Montessori in the drop-down box to sign the kids up for. So we requested that we have another option of adding J.P. Parker, Woodford, and Silverton to the list in case other parents would like them to go there. Some of the children that come in at a later age that have not gone to Montessori are pretty lost in the school for a while. It takes them a while to adapt. So our LSDMC group has talked about it, what we could do. Kimmy Kaufman and I have met with the principal at Woodford. She's on board with this. She said she used to teach Montessori, so she's very well aware of issues that can happen. And we also met with the Silverton principal recently. We have not met with J.P. Parker yet, but we requested a meeting. Add anything else?
We would also ask that from a standpoint of transportation and dollars, the goal is that on the website, when you choose to enroll a child and you plug in your address, that the options exist. And if you're within the 1 mile boundary, not adding any transportation, but if you live across the street from Woodford and you would like to continue in the traditional path of study, that you be allowed to choose that without going through the magnet process or whatever might be taken. Basically, that you could choose that school if you were within the transportation boundaries, if you want to.
I'm not sure that it's going to happen, but at Monday's meeting, the district decided to try to make a major economic investment in the east side of our district that could impact all of the schools that are in that area, whether it's Silverton or whether it's PRM or whatever. There's nothing that prevents a person or a family in one neighborhood going to another neighborhood school by policy. What prevents it is a point that the chair raised 10 months ago, which is if you were in a neighborhood, you wanted to go to a magnet, we'd provide the transportation. But we don't provide the transportation neighborhood to neighborhood. That's the policy change that you want, particularly, is that if somebody chooses a different neighborhood school from a neighborhood school, we would assume the transportation piece. That's the policy. Because policy would allow folks to choose a different neighborhood school. But whether or not procedurally or technologically we have that, that's a procedure thing that could change. And that's what you're asking for. But you don't have to change policy about neighborhood to neighborhood except for transportation and change procedures. It's not surprising that 5 years ago, the board tried to address some of these issues and it didn't get done. And it wasn't for a lack of trying. It was a will to do it when it actually came to implement it. So I feel very good about my one concern, and PRM people forgive me. I think it's wonderful if families decide they don't want to go to PRM, but I will raise holy hell if indeed what sometimes happens in our Montessori system, somebody in the front office decides we may not want that neighborhood or that kid. If it is family, but I've lived through this, and some of you have lived through this, you know very well, whether it's high school or whether it's been the elementaries, there's this selectivity. But I think it's great if we even reconfigure, kind of re-envision our district into not only our corridors, but certain, and Jeremy's been working on this on different schools that are close to each other. I think this is all part of the new vision that we have. So I think would be support for pursuing that. And certainly, as the chair has mentioned, tremendous engagement with Silverton, as long as Silverton knows all these other issues that are there. And you do. You grown-ups, you know what we're facing, especially those of you on boards and those on council. You know exactly what we're living through.
For sure. And you said it so eloquently. I'm a big data person. When you say that there are students who are not getting into the Montessori way, because there is a Montessori way. My kids were Montessori. So 2 out of 3 loved it. 1 didn't. So I get that. I would look at what neighborhoods they're coming from and what's the data. Where are they? I look at data. So where are they coming from that they're not prepared or that they're not engaged? And the only caveat for me is that it doesn't turn into selectivity, and that's an unintended consequence of what you're talking about. That is a big unintended. So I'm fine with it as long as it doesn't turn into that, and it's family driven, and it's like, oh, this was the only option, so we chose it, but I would have chosen something else. We don't want you because you're coming from that neighborhood. Other than that, I'm all for making that happen. We will again make that recommendation to administration to look into that from a procedure standpoint, what can be done that could happen. And then maybe we could have some sort of summation at our next meeting of what they have found. So Jeremy, that is something that we'll ask you to do, to look into how logistically that can happen and getting that done for you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And that's a good point. This is our policy. She's a committee member for policy, but I will send an email to our policy chair regarding the impact of that and having neighborhood schools be, well, what policy would that be?
It's transportation.
It's a transportation policy.
It's probably that.
Which is actually, I'm just going to take this 30 seconds. That's how this started, because we had a conversation about transportation and neighborhoods. If you wanted to go to a neighborhood school, which my kids did, but you didn't want to go to your neighborhood school, you wanted to go to another neighborhood school, you got no transportation. But you get transportation if you don't want to go to your neighborhood school, but you want to go to your magnet school. We didn't want to do that. We lived near South Avondale, but my kids went to Pleasant Hill, and we got no transportation. I had to take them, and it just seemed unfair. That's how the whole ad hoc came up. It was like, that's not right. And we looked at the policy, and so that's kind of how this got birthed. The ad hoc committee got birthed, because it was like, that's not fair. Neighborhood schools and magnet schools are different. They're kind of separate and unequal on some levels, and transportation was one of those. Yes, ma'am.
And I want to add, it just came to my head, this ad hoc committee has taken on, this has really blossomed, because every time you think about policy kinds of issues, something comes out of that you know you have to deal with if your policy is going to be effective. So not only I'm suggesting not only looking at the transportation policy, but it has to align with our enrollment policies as well. Because, I mean, some of the lack of enforcement, the selectivity and all that occurs because procedurally it's not being done right. So we have to make sure that it aligns.
So I'm going to say this because, thank you. It is 5:29. We're not going to start another topic. The topics, now we've got 2 down, but we got 6 more to go. But what that says to me is that there's more engagement to be done. And what it also says to me is that we have more work to do. The intention was to kind of sunset our ad hoc committee, but we really do need to work on some of the concerns. Even if we take no more new ones, we've got concerns on the table that we have to
This committee is not going to sunset. I can just tell you that right now.
I didn't think so, but
it's not. It'll sunset and it'll have to get restarted, because this is the only forum that is really equipped. We spent an hour and 20 minutes filling in a chart of self-analysis in the big group. Okay, this is sort of where this kind of thing has to happen, and then bigger groups. We talk regionally, so we don't know if it'll be this same group of people, but the reality, this work doesn't fit in any of the other standing committees, and it doesn't fit in the big board committee when we're on TV and doing whatever in the somehow we're doing. I'm not sure what sometimes, but please, this has to go on in this manner, in some way, shape, or form.
So I'm going to say this. I do see you. I hate when people ignore people. I see you. We have to close it. Ms. Phyllis, we're going to carry over number 2. I'm sorry. Not number 2, transportation requested data. We're going to carry over instructional models for middle years, school safety zones, and our report to the ad hoc committee. I think we can. I'll maybe come up with something and then send it to you all via email. Do you want to do a report at the next board meeting? Or no?
After we adjourn this, if we could just meet with our calendars real quickly.
Okay.
You gotta go.
I have to go across town.
Go.
I can't be late.
I have to go to Columbus, so I'm really trying to leave out of here. But we
go and chill. The center of the universe.
The way, can we do something like in 2 weeks or something?
Yeah, we'll have to, because we can't even report back to the board now.
So what we're going to do is, what'd you say? Yes, and our next scheduled meeting would normally be, our next scheduled meeting was going to be the 25th of May. I just want to give you all this time on the record. And then it was supposed to be May 25th. What we're talking about is having an additional meeting in 2 weeks. I'm actually out of town, except for the week of the 8th. So can we do something like the 10th?
I think that might be Cal.
It's not my calendar for Cal.
Oh.
The Cal is the 17th.
Okay, gotcha.
So what, does the 10th work? And I'm having this discussion so you all can hear when the next meeting date is, so we don't have to do
But I
this.
will tell you, we won't be spending this much time on it.
I promise you we won't.
We love you.
We sure
And
do.
You did make a great argument for
Yeah, you did.
magnet, but
Yes,
you
ma'am. Does
also
that
made a
work?
great argument for
Does
neighborhood.
the 10th work for you? Does the support board member?
Oh, my gosh. Well, now I have my,
Madam Chair, is it possible to have a summarization of what was discussed today and sent to all of the email addresses?
I believe we can do that. I think normally our admin does the minutes and she rocks it. I think she'll get it out, Ms. Phyllis. No, I was saying normally our admin does the minutes and you rock it. So as soon as we get them together, and I usually am delayed on approving them, so we'll get them together and we'll get them out, and then she'll email it out to everybody. So May 10th, does that work?
yeah, and I think we ought to plan not only the extra meeting, but this 90-minute thing is not working.
So May 10th works. 4
I can
o'clock.
do May 10th.
4 o'clock. Or you want a daytime? Yes, ma'am. May 10th. We got the 10th. We got consensus on the 10th. 4 o'clock.
As long as the village council folks behave.
Okay, so what? So I'm going to say this. It is okay with this committee for May the 10th at 4 p.m. However, we would prefer if the superintendent were available. I don't know if that works for her calendar.
Right.
So just letting you know, I don't want y'all to be mad at her again if she's not here. But May the 10th at 4 p.m. is the meeting for us. And we're gonna see if that works for the superintendent, but it may not. Okay. No, we're gonna have another meeting on the 10th, but she may not be in attendance at that meeting. Does that work? Of course, absolutely. And the meetings are public, so you can for sure come. If you cannot join in person, you can join online. I think we're done.
I move adjourn.
Second, board member Jones?
Second.
Okay, all right, and we are adjourned.